Now, as you see, Pakistan has been hit by a major power outage. Cities like Lahore, Islamabad, Karachi have been plunged into darkness. Cash-strapped Pakistan's economy is now continuously sinking deeper into the quagmire, and country of 23 crore people right now living its worst nightmare. Already reeling under major food crisis, skyrocketing inflation and multi-city protests against the Shehbaz-led Pakistan government. Now, we see that major power outage has left at least 90% of Pakistan into complete darkness. Pakistan Ministry of Energy have said that the power outage was triggered by a drop in frequency of a national grid that resulted in widespread breakdown in the power systems. In Islamabad, as many as 117 grid stations are without electricity currently. Peshawar has also been hit by the power outage. There are reports that Shehbaz government may just sell its nuclear assets now, only to stabilize their economy. Now, as we see, Pakistan continues to reel under severe electricity crisis. Earlier, in fact, the load shedding issue that they had, which hit both citizens and the industries alike, forced Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's government now to announce an urgent plan to conserve energy. Financial meltdown is, of course, one of the main reasons behind this. But what really forced Pakistan into complete darkness? Is this all self-induced? Let's take a look.
A historically bad year behind it. Things are set to get worse in Pakistan. Bruised and battered by unprecedented economic turmoil, the country has decided to do what most would consider unthinkable. It has flipped the switch on the country's electricity use.
मुल्क में भर में मौजूद तमाम शादी हाल जो हैं 10 बजे जो है वो बंद हो जाएंगे इंशाल्लाह। मार्केटें जो है वो 8:30 बजे जो है वो बंद हो जाएंगी। इस पॉलिसी से इस शादी हाल, रेस्टोरेंट्स और मार्केटों के ये अगर टाइम ऑब्जर्व हों तो 62 अरब रुपए की बचत होगी। 62 अरब रुपए की बचत होगी।
That's right. The Shehbaz Sharif government has just approved an energy austerity plan that requires markets to shut shop at 8:30 p.m. and wedding celebrations at 10 p.m. Imagine if something like that was announced in India in the festive season. While this will hit everyday Pakistanis, the government itself has decided to drop electricity usage by 30%. Saddled with inflation and virtually cleaned out cash reserves, Pakistan is not just cash-strapped but almost flat broke to service its many international debts. The devastating floods of 2022 have compounded the destructive forces of the pandemic, laying to waste any chances of a quick recovery for the country. Add to this deadly cocktail a devalued Pakistani rupee and shocking fuel prices, and today's Pakistan is virtually hell on earth for its citizens. The worst case scenario for Pakistan is a nightmare default on its loan repayments, the sort of disaster that hit Sri Lanka last year. The world still remembers the hair-raising chaos in the island nation and widespread violence that was triggered. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has floundered to stabilize since he took office in April, his rule only serving to hike the popularity of his predecessor Imran Khan, who is enjoying the disaster playing out from the sidelines. Pakistan's energies have instead been spent on internal political turmoil, a dysfunctional National Assembly, and of course, cross-border terrorism. A nation with a corrupt elite, a broken political system, and the total control of an army that hasn't wrapped its head around this latest catastrophe means Pakistan is a long way from stability and recovery. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, the crisis in Pakistan has really prompted Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif to go with a begging bowl to allies and international groups, hoping for some financial help. He even conceded quite recently that his country has paid the price for wars with India. Here's what happened.
food crisis, skyrocketing inflation, and protests. Pakistan, a country of 23 crore people, is living its worst nightmare. Massive protests erupted in the Gilgit-Baltistan region of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir on Tuesday over food shortage and runaway inflation. Enraged citizens of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir blocked highways and burnt tires to express their anger against the Shahbaz Sharif-led Pakistan government. In midst of it all, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif conceded Pakistan had learnt its lessons after fighting multiple wars with India and losing. The Pakistani Prime Minister admitted that all three wars with India had brought his country down.
Pakistan has learnt its lesson. We had 3 wars with India, 3. And the consequence of those wars, as a result, it only brought more miseries,
to the
unemployment,
two nations,
poverty.
Shahbaz Sharif claimed his country now wants to live in peace with India, but once again raked up the Kashmir issue.
We must. We are not a country, we don't have zayt or gas. We have very strong human resource, labor, engineers, etc. That's our asset. We want to convert that into our tools to provide prosperity.
Under intense pressure, Pakistan Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif's office clarified that the Prime Minister has consistently maintained that Pakistan and India must resolve their bilateral issues, especially, according to Pakistan, the core issue of Jammu and Kashmir through dialogue and peaceful means, and that too after restoration of Article 370. For far too long, Islamabad has ignored its economy, instead focusing all its energies using terrorism as an instrument of state policy. Now, the country is drowning in debt. In a desperate bid to remain afloat, Pakistan has taken a fresh loan from the United Arab Emirates this week. But the financial help from the Arab nation is actually too little and too late to bail out a sinking Pakistan. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, as we see that Pakistan, which is currently bankrupt, is now literally powerless in literally every form. Pakistan is now shutting down its markets, malls, wedding halls as early as 8:30. And the reason being to save on some kind of energy. Sharif government has also directed all government departments there to reduce electricity consumption to at least 30%. Here is a look at the immediate steps that Pakistan is taking to salvage this situation.
Filling cooking gas in balloons, people in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa are resorting to dangerous and desperate measures. For the cash-strapped nation with no natural supply to homes, an unprecedented economic crisis looms, facing free fall in essential items and expensive energy imports. In a recent announcement, the Pakistan government has now ordered malls and markets to close by 8:30 p.m. Wedding halls to shut by 10 p.m. Sharif government has also ordered all government departments to reduce electricity consumption by 30%. Half of the street lights across the country will remain on alternate days. Nightmare for summers, as even production of energy in efficient bulbs and fans will be banned from February.
बर में मौजूद तमाम शादी हाल जो हैं 10 बजे जो है वो बंद हो जाएंगे इंशाल्लाह। मार्केटें जो है वो 8:30 बजे जो है वो बंद हो जाएंगी। इस पॉलिसी से इस शादी हाल, रेस्टोरेंट्स और मार्केटों के ये अगर टाइम ऑब्जर्व हों तो 62 अरब रुपए की बचत होगी।
But in Lahore and Karachi, two big cities, traders refused to comply and have revolted, saying their businesses would be ruined.
बात यह है कि जब आपने हमसे तजावीज़ ले ली तो फिर आपने हमसे कहा कि ये मैं वज़ीर आज़म साहब के पास रखूंगा, वफाकी काबीना में ले जाऊंगा, उधर से फिर हम आपके साथ दोबारा मुशावरत करेंगे, लेकिन उन्होंने ऐसा नहीं किया और आज खुद से ऐलान कर दिया कि ताजरों की मुशावरत से किया है।
8 बजे से लेके 10 बजे तक ही काम होता है, उसके अलावा सारे दिन तो काम होता ही नहीं है। यही थोड़ा सा टाइम होता है जो बंद करने पे आ गए, लेकिन हम नहीं करेंगे अल्लाह के हुक्म से बंद।
Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves barely cover a month's worth of imports, most of which are accounted for by energy purchases from abroad, with funds expected under an IMF program having been delayed. Pakistan's total liquid foreign exchange reserves stood at $11.7 billion to $5.8 billion with the central bank as of last month, having fallen 50% in 2022. Pakistan struggles to quell default fears in domestic and international markets with $1.1 billion IMF bailout tranche stuck and delayed. Inflation being forecast to stay high between 21 to 23% in 2023. Recent floods caused economic losses of over $30 billion and the country's debt has jumped to a record high of 60 trillion Pakistani rupees. Pakistan owes 30% of foreign debt to China. This means political slavery to dictatorial communist regime. Having already rented off diplomatic properties to fill coffers, the situation is only going from bad to worse. Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, the Shehbaz Sharif government, since coming to power in April 2022, has been quite struggling to keep the ship from sinking completely. In fact, Pakistan has now been spiraling out of control, like what happened to Sri Lanka just last year. Country's balance sheet is now abysmal, with debts piling up, and it would take really generations now to pay it off. Here's a look.
Pakistan's economy slowed in 2019 and contracted in 2020, as did for most other countries due to global pandemic. Though growth resumed in 2021, it nearly got paralyzed with mounting debt burden and political instability in 2022. When Imran Khan became Prime Minister in 2018, he promised jobs, new housing and economic reforms. But tensions between India and Pakistan remained high. Political and social instability hinder economic development. Textiles and apparel account for most export earnings of Pakistan, but much of its economy is informal, and underemployment remains high. China pledged more than $60 billion in infrastructure and energy investments in China-Pakistan economic corridor projects, but it suffered significant setbacks and has drawn criticism. Pakistan's exchange reserves have declined by $6.7 billion, and its biggest ally, China, started to reduce its investment in the country. Pakistan today struggles to quell default fears in domestic and international markets. With a $1.1 billion IMF bailout tranche stuck due to differences which otherwise should have been completed last November, it's staring at a possible bankruptcy. The food crisis has also deepened in the country. Food inflation quickened 35.5% year-on-year, while transport prices rose 41.2% in December 2022. Such is the extent of the crisis that the government auctioned a Pakistani embassy property in the US a few days ago. The 2022 monsoon flood increased Pakistan's dependence on imported goods other than oil, while the country's exports slumped. According to the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, the country's trade deficit stood at over $2.8 billion in December 2022, as exports declined by over 16% to $2.3 billion. A depreciating currency isn't helping the economic situation either. Pakistani rupee fell by nearly 30% in 2022, compared to the US dollar. A Reuters report stated that Pakistan has to meet external financing needs to the tune of over $30 billion up until June 2023, including energy and debt repayments. By all counts, that's an impossible feat considering the country's sluggish GDP growth. The World Bank has pegged it at just 2%. Pakistan is also facing skyrocketing inflation that could rise up to 23% in the current financial year. Slower growth and rising inflation could prove to be a dangerous combination for the nation, as getting a job would be harder and harder for its population. The World Bank, in its annual debt report published recently, estimated that Pakistan's total external debt was at $130.433 billion by 2021. The country has to pay $33 billion debts by 2023. Steve Hank, professor of applied economics at Johns Hopkins University, in a tweet on 14th October last year said Pakistan was on the brink of a debt default. Its sovereign bonds, he said, lost more than 60% of their value in 2022. China is Pakistan's largest bilateral creditor, with outstanding loans of $14.5 billion. Only the Asian Development Bank at $14 billion and the World Bank at $18.1 billion have comparable amounts owed to them. Pakistan also owes $8.77 billion to commercial banks, which includes banks from West Asia and 3 Chinese lenders: the Bank of China, ICBC and China Development Bank. All 3 of them are state-owned banks. Between 2016-17 to 2020-21, the 3 Chinese lenders extended short-term loans worth $11.48 billion. It is not clear how much of this amount is still outstanding. Pakistan pays a higher rate of interest to China and its banks compared to ADB and World Bank. While the loans from the latter to international financial organizations are for 25 to 30 years and have been made at much lower rates, Chinese commercial banks are for shorter tenures of 1 to 3 years and at higher interest rates. This difference also extends to bilateral lending. Compared to other bilateral lenders, China's loan tenures are shorter and interest rates higher. Bilateral loans from Germany, Japan and France charge interest of under